Get ready for a great show.
Black space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. For the topic of our discussion today, we are going to examine the question in part 2 of how do we build back the Black nuclear family. Before we get started, I would like to take this time to briefly encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. You can catch Black Space Live on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Spotify. And you can catch us on Anchor FM, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Now, there's no sense in introducing these panelists who need no introduction. So I'm just going to throw them right in the cold water and have them tell you whatever they think you should know about them today, beginning with the lovely Dantrice.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm Deontrice. I'm a Houston native. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm an interior designer, and I'm currently about to graduate with my master's and head to law school.
Congratulations, Deontrice.
Thank you.
And welcome, Big Daniel.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? The Daniel Williams, aka Mr. One of One, aka None Before, None to Come. Best way I like to describe myself is I'm a student who teaches as I learn. Glad to be here.
Damn, I should have put on the theme music. Boy, that boy is ice with his, man. Ice with his. Now, since this is part 2, I had opened up with a monologue to this, but I'm not going to waste that time in a monologue. I want to just jump right into it. If you want to hear the monologue, go back to part 1 and check that out. I still feel it's relevant to this discussion. But we want to spend maybe the first 15 to 20 minutes assessing the issue, and then the last really challenging us on how do we bring solutions to this discussion. So, beginning with Deontrice, please cite for me, in your opinion, the top 3 obstacles contributing to single parenthood in our community.
I'm going to say 1, money, 2, systemic issues within our society, and 3, just a mindset for me.
Okay, do you want to elaborate on any of those?
Well, we know that there's systemic issues that have kept, Black families as a whole behind. So that's that. But it's also a mindset to me. A lot of people really don't have a problem being single parents. They don't see an issue with it. They prefer it. And I get it. Some situations you don't have a choice. But statistics show that 2-family homes, those kids do turn out, better. And so when you have people going into it who want to be single parents, who want to do that alone, who feel that they can raise it, it's always better with more. But when you have a mindset that you can just do this on your own, like you have people who go to banks and single people who go and get artificially inseminated because they want to have a child but they don't want to have a family. It's a mindset. Or you go into relationships with people not being really mindful of who you're having children with, and it doesn't work out, and then that breaks up the home. But nobody sees the issue with that. It's, well, if it don't work out, we just gonna figure it out. No, I always tell people, before you have children with somebody, make sure that there's somebody that you want to be stuck with, because that's a lifetime commitment. And a lot of people are just out here just sleeping together with not thinking of the consequences, getting people pregnant, getting pregnant, and then giving these children and putting these children into broken homes. It's a mindset that has to be broken.
Gotcha. Hey, Deontre, are you driving?
I'm writing.
Are you writing? Would you, if your window's down,
mute.
or if anybody's window's down, would you roll it up? We might be catching some of that draft on.
Yeah, and I put my mute on when I'm not talking.
Okay, gotcha. No problem.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for that contribution of your perspective there, Deontre. Daniel, your thoughts to the top 3 obstacles from your perspective that are contributing to single parenthood in our community.
Absolutely. The first 2 I think are very similar to Deontre's. The first one is education to me. Second one is economics. And the third one is misogamy/misandry.
Wow. I got to go back to spelling class on this, buddy. Okay, you're going to have to elaborate. Start anywhere you want to in your list and elaborate, please.
Absolutely. So, I really love the fact that she said mindset. So because I couldn't go with mindset again, I went with education, and I think a lot of it is, but it does contribute to mindset. We don't really get taught how to love each other and how to care for each other, and I think, and how to value each other. Right. I think somebody said there's a quote that says, things won't get better until we learn how to use things and love people. And instead, we tend to love things and use people. And I think there's an education, a re-education, if you will, that needs to happen within our communities around that. So, and I'll touch a little bit more on that as we go. So I won't take too much meat off the bones on that. Economics are a huge part of it. I read a study recently that said that a black man has the same employability as a white man 2 educational levels below. What that means is, if you are a white man and did not finish high school,
correct,
you have the same employability as a black man who has gone to college.
Yes.
Finished high school and gone to college.
Yes.
If you are a white man who graduated from high school, you have the same employability as a black man who has graduated from college. Right. So that's 2 educational levels below. And what that turns out to be is that translates into significant percentage points, but that's millions of individual people that are either unemployed or underemployed. And when you look at the economics, and I recently saw something that said the median earnings for black men is something like $46,000 a year.
Correct.
And then there was another one that said that the median average household income, and it broke it down by the different cultures. We were on the bottom, and we were at about $54,000 a year. So goes back to what Deontre was saying, which was 2 family households, 2 parent households, specifically 2 income households, tend to earn better and tend to be less likely to be in poverty than single parent or single individual households. And then the last one speaks a little to a mindset issue. And I really didn't want to come at anyone individually, so I put them both together. We talk a lot about misogamy, but we don't really talk a lot about misandry, which is hatred of men. And I think there is this thought or mindset that men ain't
Right.
and a man is only as good as what he can provide for me. And I think it has to be said that the concept of feminism as it is currently evolved into has not served the Black woman the same way it has served her white counterparts.
Good stuff.
But not to let us off the hook as men, we got to do a better job as well of learning how to love, respect, honor, and cherish our women as well.
Gotcha. So I had a recent experience directly related to your last point, misandry. But I want to develop the conversation a little bit more before I get into it, because that really is a crucial issue. You know, when I started this series, I do work. I'm a mental health therapist, so I'm working with families and I'm seeing these issues. But I was sharing with the producer over the period of doing this series on this particular topic that I'm in the field, I'm doing this work, and I had no idea how bad it is between the African male and female in our community. It is bad. It's bad. So I want to share that with you because that's huge. And we don't realize, at least, well, maybe you all do. I guess I'm just catching up. I didn't realize this was so intensely etched into the emotional mindset.
Yes.
It's bad.
Yes, it is. It's bad.
It's bad. It's bad on both sides. But however, this misandry really has surprised me because it's intensely trauma filled. So we're going to have to really get into that. So there are definitely some overlaps between your analyses, different words, but also different nuances in your particular perspectives. So we'll just kind of go in a little easy. We'll do with the mindset perspective that DeAndre had shared. Single parenthood, I think you said it really well, DeAndre. Single parenthood has become normalized.
It's become so normalized, and it's almost like a badge of honor. And it's I'm doing this by myself, but whether it's the woman or the man, it's still something that's a struggle. I tell people all the time, before I met my husband, I was a single parent for 3 years and it was not easy. And then he joined the military, and when he would get deployed, it felt like I was a single parent all over again. And I always prefer him being home. He's out now. Because having that extra hand and that extra help and that extra influence and it's something that your kids see and strive for. For me, saw my mama be a single mama, and I knew that was something I wanted for myself because I saw the struggle she went through. And so I knew that even though I did have a child young, I knew that was going to be the only child I had out of wedlock, because I wasn't going to put my kids through that. And my mama was a great mom. She did the best that she could. I have no complaints about my mom. But I also know that it could have been better if we had that nuclear 2-parent household, me, her, my siblings. It just would have been easier on her, which would have made a lot of things different for us.
And you've been married how long?
17 years this October.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, that's
He's who I'm riding with right now.
Well, I actually give him my congratulations and my condolences to you.
I see what you did there. I love him to death.
And I joke on that, but statistically, this is bad to say, but this is proven in research that men fare better than women in marriage.
And when I argue with people about that online, specifically Black men, they say it's laughable. And I'm like, well, I don't argue feelings. I can debate
This
with
is
you facts.
facts.
And this is
This is
a
facts.
statistic.
Yes.
And they don't never want to hear it because all they see is what can she bring to the table. Because when I
Exactly.
tell them that I don't pay any bills, but I do run this household, there's
Yes.
a reason for that.
Yes.
So I don't have to bring
It's a
money
business.
to the table because I take care of the household. My husband is the head, but I'm the neck. So while he takes care of everything, I make sure food is cooked or gotten, house is clean, kids
Yeah.
are good.
Hugely
I
important.
am the person. Yeah, the little things
Hugely.
that you don't pay attention to
That you don't pay for.
yeah, that when we go out of town, I'm the one making sure everybody's straight. I'm the one making the reservations. I'm the one doing, and it's little things like that you don't pay attention to. That when you get it, when it leaves you, suddenly it's dang.
Oh man, what happened? Then who gonna do that?
And it's little things that he does as well, big things and little things outside of the stuff that he does to provide.
Yeah.
It's other things that he does that I know that if he was not here, I would miss greatly.
Yeah, it's not about big I, little you. Who's the boss? Who's the subservient? Both roles are equal as in importance, but that doesn't mean they're the same. And I think people, and I think that's where, and let's make it this segue or transition to one of Daniel's assertions about feminism, because I think somehow feminism in and of itself really isn't a negative concept. But I think the way feminism has been applied in our community has given feminism a bad name.
It's not feminism; it's misandry, and it's much like yeah, we gonna get some comments on this one. All right.
Oh yeah.
It's much like how this system, the economic system, is. We call it capitalism, but it's really corporatism, where the big corporations get to write the rules that they play by. It's really not feminism. It's called feminism, but it's instead of it being where it started, which is we want the same rights as what men have, it's turned into we don't need men.
Right.
And at this, so it has to be called something different to differentiate, but nobody's willing to say that's not what feminism is. Feminism isn't we don't need men, because things still got to get built. Somebody's still got to pick up the garbage. Somebody's still got to do all those dirty jobs that tend to be 95 to 98% male dominated industry.
Thanks, Gigi Wentworth.
And we can't have babies without it. Without them. Like,
well, they're trying to get to that too, right?
They're trying to do that.
They're trying to get to that too, where you don't really need the physical man. You need the man's essence, but not the physical man.
Yeah, but you still need the man.
True.
You know, like
but one
the man is still needed.
But one man can repopulate an entire.
Well, yeah, but that's gonna start a whole nother issue, because then you repopulating, but who's recreating with them same? At this point, you're going to a whole nother realm of incest and stuff. So
I get it. I'm not arguing against men. I'm just saying that that's been the premise behind what you hear a lot about, which is men aren't needed anymore, right? It's gone from where I prefer a good man I'd rather a good man rather than no man, but no man rather than a bad man, to where it's I don't even want a man, I don't need a man. But the challenge with that, and there was something that was said, and I think it was, I can't remember who said it, but studies have actually shown that pretty much from every measure that you can that of quality of life being raised, the quality of life of a child raised only by the father is only marginally worse than that of a child raised in a two-family household, whereas a child raised only by a mother is significantly less worse off than one that's raised in a two-family household. So it actually states that the father is generally the defining factor of how well a child ultimately does. Now, it's not to say that the nuclear family is not important, but this premise that a good father, is no longer necessary or needed in the household is laughable at best, disingenuous at worst.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to bring back in a piece of the monologue that I had read in part one, because I think this is particularly here. And then I want to share with you this recent experience of mine that I think is relevant here. First, I want to just read the definition of feminism so that everybody is on the same page here. The advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. That's it. That sounds pretty harmless to me. What do you think?
It's harmless in theory, but I mean, it's turned into this big conglomerate of things that suddenly, and I'm all for feminism because I'm a woman, of course, but I'm not for everything else. A lot of the things that come out of it, because I do see it as detrimental to our community. I can be a feminist and not also say I don't subscribe to that part, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the definition of it is just plain and simple. That's what it is. It's kind of like, but I feel like it hasn't really helped Black women in particular, because kind of like affirmative action. Affirmative action has helped more white women than it has Black people as a whole. That's how I kind of see feminism working, if that makes sense.
Yes, completely. Yeah, and that aligns with what Daniel said. And I would like to add to that it's trauma that has degraded the concept and the pureness of, or the purity of, the concept of feminism. And especially as it pertains to our community, it's racial trauma. Now, being a woman, it just all things being equal, being a woman can be a traumatic experience in a world that at least appears to be male dominated. And I think that most men don't understand the type of daily incidents that can be traumatic to the average woman.
Especially if you're a woman in corporate America, which is really male dominated, and it, you get a lot of sexism and whatnot. And what I always like to tell people is that with us wanting, it started off, and for me, when I say I want equality, I want equality in my pay, equality in how you see me in the office. If I'm just as educated as Jim Bob, I should be treated just with the same respect as him. I'm not out here trying to, if that's what you want to do as a woman, that's fine, but I'm not out here trying to be equal in everything. I don't want to fix a car. I don't want to cut grass. I don't want to do all of that. There are certain things that I just, as a woman, I don't want to do. I feel like that men can do that stuff, and I let them. I don't even pump gas. But when it comes to things like that, with Black women, especially being the most educated group of people in America, there's absolutely no reason for us to be the least paid group in America and treated like we are at our jobs.
Right. So let me bring in this point that I wanted to share with you to really drill down in. First, I'll read from the second half of the monologue that I did in part one. I said, now, in general, there is just an automatic gap naturally due to our gender differences. However, when you add in the unique experience of no other group but the African in America, the generational, historical, systemic abuse, the gap between male and female in our community, at this point appears impenetrable to any attempts at closure. It is as if the male and female African born in America did not and does not have the same Black experience. Here is where I find it to be most evident. In the population of the six-figure successful African female, they in general appear to be the least aware, knowledgeable, or even concerned about the plight of their male counterpart. They are quicker to blame and criticize him for his current condition than to understand the why behind it. Now, I can understand this more easily in this struggling single mother, such as we've been discussing today. She doesn't have the time nor the energy to understand what men are going through, as she is in constant survival mode. But the six-figure African female, theoretically, she should be in more of a position to educate herself on these historical and contemporary issues. She is in more effective position to advocate, influence, and take strategic action in support of her male counterpart. But how can she if she is not even willing to fully acknowledge the fact of the systemic attack on her community, especially if she herself has a son soon to be a man? Now, before I share my personal experience that kind of really continues to motivate me to address this issue, tell me your thoughts on what I just read here.
There's something interesting about that, because at the root, it basically comes down to, instead of it being a partnership, it's now a competition in a lot of those cases. And it's difficult. And there are a lot of guys that talk about this, so I'm not going to cover ground that they've covered. Mm-hmm. However, it's frequently been said that a woman's attainment and a woman's accolades don't matter in the dating market to most men, right? So
yeah, it is often said. That's true.
And when a guy says, "What do you bring to the table?" It's always, and this is the perfect example, right? It's always heard as, "What do you bring to the table financially?" But it's never heard as, "How does your presence improve my life over what it is currently?" That's a different question. That's a very different question, and it's never articulated as such. But most men that have means and have a level of success and attainment, that is really what they're asking is, I can just stay single and my life is pretty good. Yeah. How does your presence in my life improve upon my current situation? And if not, if you can't even answer that question, then the answer is it probably doesn't.
That's deep.
And I agree with that. And let me add to it to say that it also depends, and y'all might hate me for saying this, but also depends on what tax bracket he's in. Because from what I see, the men who aren't in that same tax bracket, when they do ask, "What do you bring to the table?" they are asking about financially, because they're like, "Look, I can't, if we're going to do this together, what can you bring that we can do this together?" I've learned that people in a different tax bracket, they won't say, "What will you bring to the table?" They'll say what you said, Mr. Daniel. They'll say, "How can you enhance my life?" It's always a different conversation. And if you ask a specific question, you'll get a specific answer from a woman if she got her head on straight. So, if a woman makes a certain thing, it's not that we wouldn't take anybody that makes less than us, but it's one of those, I think once we get to a certain level, it's how, yes, I can help you, but are you able to help yourself? And if I help you, are we a team?
Right.
Or will you end up slacking because I carry the load for the most part? That's an honest fear, because that does happen in our community. I've seen it often. And as a woman, I can say that would be a fear that, well, I wouldn't do that to my husband, because if he can't work, then I got him. But I can understand a woman who's dating, who's like, "Hey, I need you to kind of match where I'm at, or at least show me that you won't throw me out to the wind and be like, well, my girl got it." So, because there's plenty of people who will quit their jobs if they got a high paying woman and be like, "Well, I can just go and work on my dream." I've seen it happen.
So DeAndres, the area that I specifically addressed towards the successful African female, the assertions that I made with her apparent lack or willful neglect of the situation of her male counterpart. that she should be in a better position to advocate and make change and address these issues coming at her man and most likely her son. Why the lack of apparent compassion for women at that level for their
I
male
think it's
counterpart?
because of what a black woman essentially has had to do to get to even where she's at. She's still fighting for herself. And so when you think about how she's still fighting for herself, even when she's up there, because once you get up there in them high six figures, you're dealing with a different beast there. You're dealing with different misogyny and sexism and misandry and all of this other stuff. So when you add that into that, it's like, that's why I always say that two are better than one if you can help each other. So if the mindset is, and I truly think that's what it is, and I'm not saying it's right, but I truly think it's, I'm already fighting for myself. You want me to fight for you too? Because remember, you said it, the single mother, even if she's making six figures, she's still out here doing it for her kid and her son and her daughters. You know what I mean? So she's still fighting for that. And so then you add on to that, I got to fight for him too. I hope he's also fighting for me. Because if I'm fighting for everybody, then I'm depleted. So self-preservation comes into play.
Got you. So very, very understandable. And it's perfectly plausible that just because you attain that level, you're still not in any more secure position than the lower socioeconomic single mother. And so let's take that, and either of you can jump in on this. So if that's a justifiable, that is a plausible, realistic occurrence for the successful African woman, and I would even say for the successful African man who also would appear to be in a better position, but he does not do either on a collective level. For example, you cited how whites have benefited more off of what was that, the feminism or something else than blacks. During the Obama reign, more white people benefited from his policies than the African population. Most people don't realize that. They call him the first black president, but really it was the racial demographic white people that most benefited and are still benefiting today, that most of them don't really understand, right? So that being the case, how do you break that cycle? How do you break that cycle? If both sides are too stressed and too insecure to come collectively, when they know that theoretically, if we come together, we're stronger, but we dare not come together because I got all of these beasts at my door. What do we do?
Well, part of the challenge is the when we come together, right? It is said that our European counterparts find their mate at college, and we go to college to get the degree. And so in a lot of cases, a lot of ours don't actually get into serious relationships that have the potential to be a long-term partnership until we've attained a certain level. So we don't build together. And here's why that becomes an issue. The design of the system forces assimilation in order to ascend. For it requires assimilation, a level of assimilation for ascension, right? The more you can pass as one of the good ones, the more likely you are to go further out, right? It's basically back to being the house versus the field. And if you advocate for those in the field, then your position in the house is at threat. And so it's difficult to say, well, I might be a VP or a director position here, but if I speak out against injustice that's happening in society, then all of a sudden I'm looked at as one of the troublemakers, right? And so a lot of it goes back to what she said, is it's from a position of self-preservation. It's difficult for me to advocate for those in my community because I have to maintain that appearance of being worthy of being in this particular position. It's why I go back to the education, right? That's one part of it. But it also goes back to the economics. We really have to build our own economic system that can almost stand apart from the current economic system, because cannot remember who said it, but if he said, if you depend on a man to feed you, he can also starve you. And that's ultimately what it becomes down to. You maintain the illusion of assimilation in order to maintain this regular paycheck. Ultimately, it has to be a targeted. We have to start earlier on building relationships earlier, healthy relationships earlier, that aren't filled with trauma, that aren't filled with hatred, that aren't filled with selfishness, that have communication and collaboration at the root of it. And then we have to build.
So we have to do those things, and
Yes.
you're correct on there, but the how is the problem.
Well, first we have to start by stop attacking each other. It's like you said, a competition. And I honestly wish I knew a way to get us out of that. I see it every day on Facebook and Instagram. It's always a war of women want this and men want you to do that and X, Y, and Z. And it's really more of a, okay, if we get out of our own heads, we could be something dynamic. But until, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, but until we can honestly figure out a way, because honestly, it's going to start with us not always saying women want, women, men. It's always an attack on which gender is doing the most,
right,
in a relationship. Like I saw a meme today where somebody said Black women can't get in a relationship because they want to be paid to be in a relationship. And I just kind of scrolled by it because I'm like, when I looked at it, it was like 500 comments, and I was just like,
yeah.
Here we go. It's
triggered. Yeah, they were triggered.
Yeah. And I'm like, this isn't even really an argument we should be having. Let's
put
this aside.
Which again gets back to my assertion that both of you are talking about what we need to do, which I 100% agree. But the how is where the problem is. So let me share with you my story. I think that this podcast, this show here, Black Space Live, is a tool for resource on providing the how, bringing great minds like you are here, because we're putting down information that can be used over and over and over. People can reflect and go back and hear some things that they didn't hear the first time, because this is a resource. And the first step is to get people to even just open up their thinking way, put your thinking cap on, think critically, And I think this show, this is a perfect medium for that. Not the only one, but it's things like this that provoke thought that we need to do, because we're not thinking. I was on a platform called Clubhouse, and I'm not going to say any names because I respect the people that are on it, but I pissed them off a few weeks ago, and I had no idea what I was stepping into. And it was myself, a couple other guys, and Penny was on it, so I can say his name, and hopefully on the next show he'll give you his take on it. And you all would probably know some of the women on the Clubhouse show, so I'm not going to put that out, because even though we had a really bad discussion, I still respect them all. Okay, so. Toward the end of the podcast, it was on a whole nother topic. It wasn't on this, but I had mentioned that we're doing this series, and that it's a really important issue. And, I was hoping like maybe to even get some of them to come on. And so as I got into it, I had just made a comment. I said, you know, one of the issues in our community is that when men stand up for themselves and express their displeasure, it really seems to trigger female response. And so one of the women said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, when we say something that we like or disapprove of or approve of, all of a sudden, man, an explosion. Who are you to approve of anything? I'm like, huh? Why did you use that word? Who do you think you? I mean, it was bad. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? It's just a word. I didn't. Well, I mean, they completely lost it. I mean, I stumbled across a trigger factor, and they could not recover from that. Toward the end, I even apologized. I said, hey, you know, I didn't realize that word was going to be that damaging. I just learned something today. And so now I'll try to be more, but it didn't dent their emotional reaction. And then one of them said, you probably are against feminism. I'm like, what? I mean, the conversation went bonkers. And they just unloaded on me like, man, they were just waiting for somebody like me to come in, because they've been holding this in for a long time, right? The stuff that they carry around. This is trauma. This is trauma. And then Penny jumped in, and you know he let them have it, but that they didn't eat him up like they ate me up. They really were triggered on me. You know, but Penny let him have it though,
because you initially said it, and I was saying it was a trigger word. It was trauma. Sometimes I think it's how you word stuff. I had to learn that because I kind of understand where it came from. Not saying it's right.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing them. I'm not trying to cast them in a bad light or anything. Because, like I said, I learned something.
It's kind of one of those things where it kind of stems from what my understanding of it is, the whole submissive argument.
Right.
And like I've always said, and I'll stand on this, and my husband has said this: a woman has no problem being submissive to a man that properly leads. And so, but when that submissive argument comes up, you know, it's always with authoritative words like approve, disapprove, you can't, I won't let you, you know what I mean? And I think too, like it goes back to Daniel's thing of education. I don't think a lot of men understand what submissive means. I'm a very submissive woman, but we're still a team. And I think a lot of times, depending on how you grew up and what you were taught, you think submissive means control.
But here's the thing,
and
though.
So a lot of
I would not have ever used the word submissive in discussions like this, because I know that is a trigger word. I had no idea that a word like approve or disapprove would cause that.
Yes.
And I guess because, you know, women have a different relationship with that word than men do. But when I tried to say that's not how I intended the use of that word to be, they didn't want to accept that. And so because I wasn't even getting into submission.
They should have let you talk. They honestly should have let you explain yourself. And that's why I had to get off Clubhouse, because of that one thing. Because if you say one thing, everybody dog piles, and then you can never get your explanation out because they've already you and it's hard to recover the room. But it's one of those where I'm like, well, it's an education thing on men's part, but it's also I just wish everybody would listen.
Yeah, we have to be free enough to make mistakes, right?
Make mistakes, and I don't think everybody's really attacking each other. I think, like you said, there's so much trauma there on both sides. Yes. That everything, even if you say you're disapproved, like men have a right to not like things just as much as women.
Just like you women. Yeah, that's how I meant that. Exactly.
Like there's things that he doesn't like that I don't do because he doesn't like it. And I respect that. And I don't say, you don't have a right not to like that. And who are you not to like that? And certain things he don't approve of. You know, and just like it's things I don't like that he respects. it's just it comes down to listening. I remember my grandfather telling me that it's true. He said, because I want to go back to what you said about it. My grandfather touched on this, and we used to always have conversations.
Mhm.
And he said, I asked him, I said, why do men always say that your education doesn't matter? I said, but at the same time, they ask us, what do we bring to the table?
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
said, it's one of two things. He said, your education doesn't matter because, like you said, most men want to know how can you enhance his life? He said, but then you do have those men who do care about what you make and what you can bring to the table. He said, and those are not the men who are saying your education doesn't matter. Because my argument to him was, we aren't getting degrees for men. I'm not getting my master's and my law degree for my husband. I'm getting it for myself. Just like he got his degrees for himself. You know what I mean? These are what I want to do with my life. And my grandpa said pointedly, he said, and we understand that to an extent. He said, but sometimes as women, that's our crown per se. And sometimes he said, for men, if your degree and your accolades are what you put up higher, then where do I stand? Is if your degrees and accolades and money are up here and you want to build something with me, do I come on top of that? Am I before that? Or is that the most important thing to you when we're together? And I understand that completely, because as a woman, I would hope that I come before my husband's job and degrees. I would hope that I'm your first priority. You know what I mean? Because I'm your wife. So I understand that you tout your degrees. And he said it's for men too, who tout their jobs and accolades, and they brag about that. And if that's your top tier, if that's what's most important to you, then for the person that you're trying to be with, they're going to know that they're always number 2 or 3.
See, I want to jump in real quick because I also think, as in general, society kind of has got us fooled in a little bit, because there's so many people who define themselves by what they have accomplished and what they do as far as their occupation, but they don't necessarily know how to define themselves by their value to society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a nuance, but it's a huge difference between those two things, right? You could say, well, I'm a stockbroker. But does a stockbroker really add value to society? Right? But it sounds good. You might make good money, but you don't really who are you the person, not who are you the position. And I think there are a lot of people, both men and women, who don't know how to answer that properly. The difference is there are a lot of women who place value in a man's job, and men don't place the same value in a woman's job. And so
Because
that's where that
and that's
disconnect
all
is.
about the provider and things like that. If you notice how I introduced myself, I gave you my name. I said I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an interior designer, and then I'm getting my degrees. I literally laid out what's more important to me. That's how I've always introduced myself. But men, because, and I will tell you this, I met mine in college, but I was also raised a little different. I come from a silver spoon. And so I understand that the things that come from that. So I was taught to get an education, but also that you're going to find the love of your life in college. And I met my husband in college. And I see even when I talk to my friends now, I see a viewpoint way differently on how they were raised. Like one of my best friends, she was like, no, I was taught to go to college and get my degree. And if I didn't, then I wouldn't. And I was not raised to be a strong, independent woman. I was raised to be soft, feminine, allowed. Like I don't even pump gas. I don't take out trash. I have not touched that stuff even as a child. Growing up, my father, uncles, brothers, they always made sure my gas tank was full. I never had to touch my daughters don't touch that now. My oldest daughter does not pump her own gas. Her father will meet her wherever she's at to put gas in her car. But I understand that we raised our children differently. Even my husband wasn't raised that way, but I was raised that way. So when we're raising these kids, I'm like, no. Our daughters would, and he didn't even see things that way at first. He learned from me because he saw his mama taking out the trash. He saw his grandma pumping the gas. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So, and so because like the people I grew up with, most of them were raised like me, which in turn I didn't learn until I got into college that I was being raised like our Caucasian counterparts and other races are. From I didn't know that. I thought that was the norm until I got to my HBCU and I saw that there were more Black women than there were Black men, and I was a little confused about the difference in amounts of people. And that's when I learned that people were taught to be strong, independent people, women who can do it on their own. I have never in my life strived to be that person.
So
Because
all the things that you're saying here that both you and Daniel said, they come under the category of identity.
yes.
And the reason we get a lot of these responses, a lot of these emotional responses, or the reason we, particularly to our community, I would say people in general do this, but we in specific to our community, we're kind of out of balance with this. We place priorities in things that we think define us more than we place priorities in us, which goes back to what Daniel said earlier when he made that quote, that we're taught how to love things
and use people.
And so we assign our value to the things that we attain. We don't assign value to just who we are, because we don't know who you are. We know what that is, but when you look in the mirror, we don't really know who we are, and it's bad. It's
because
really
now it's
bad.
all about labels and I drive this and I wear that.
Exactly.
And I'm constantly drilling to my children that, like I saw something the other day on Facebook. Somebody said you're taking $1,000 trips wearing $10 outfits. I absolutely am. First of all, $1,000 trip is cheap. But two,
but I saw the bottom below that. You saw the comment, the response before that?
Yeah, and they say you at home. But you at home. And I said I absolutely, because somebody asked me how I felt about that. I said I'm absolutely going to wear $10. I said I'm not going to go to another country and wear my expensive stuff. What I look like wearing Gucci slides in another country. I don't want to make nobody, I don't want to attract nobody to think that they can come. If you've ever been overseas, pickpocketers are real. I used to live over there. You don't want to attract nothing more than you. But what does it matter if I'm wearing a $10 outfit?
Right.
On a vacation? I'm on vacation.
On vacation.
And I drill to my kids all the time. Things, tangible things, don't matter because they can be replaced.
Yeah.
This is why we don't do Christmas gifts. We go on trips. This is why, because you're not going to remember that gift 2 weeks later, but you're going to remember that experience I gave you. You're going to remember going to Disney for Christmas. You're going to remember going to the Bahamas for Thanksgiving. You're going to remember those things. And they love it. They prefer gifts over toys. You get toys all throughout the year. Your birthdays come up, good grades, all of that. Let's go on a trip. But because we value, our society is so, I love social media and hate it at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of facades.
Yeah.
On social media, the Miss USA Chelsea who killed herself, who every day was smiling on her Instagram and jumped off of her 20-story balcony. The DJ who shot himself in the head, who was giving motivational dances and stuff every day, because you get online and you see these people posting their accomplishments and their fancy things, and they may be younger than you or older than you, and you feel like you have not accomplished anything because, honey, they probably got all that stuff off DHgate. It's probably not even real. Like I tell my daughter all the time, she's like, I want to be an influencer. I'm like, why? Because you see them wearing fancy stuff, because you don't know what they have to do. I have to school her on the Dubai trips and what they actually do to go over there to get that money and all of that stuff. So everything's not what it seems. Social media is a gift and a curse, and it's really been a detriment to not only society but Black society, in my opinion. Because I've always said we're not supposed to know this much about everybody. We're not supposed to know your every thought. We're not supposed to know your every move. And now people feel like if you don't post it, it didn't happen. I rarely post any of my great moments. I may post a funny anecdote about my kids or something, but I'm rarely taking pictures because I'm in the moment. I travel more than anybody I know. I'm actually heading on a plane tomorrow. I just really wish that we could put the phones down and the social media down. Like even when you go to restaurants, have you noticed people will be at the tables?
Yeah.
Everybody's on their phone. We have a no phone rule when we go to the restaurants. Everybody has to put their phone in a little bit in somebody's bag, and the bag goes under the table until we're done eating. Let's talk to each other.
Yes. Well, I at the beginning, I asked you all to give me your 3 obstacles that you saw. I want to give you mine. This leads more towards the solution side of the conversation, but we took a lot of time on the analysis side, and rightfully so, because the perspectives you guys brought, they deserve that time. And clearly we're going to have a part 3 to come back. And what I am going to do is after this show, I'm going to take this link and drop it over to the ladies who had me for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And let them check that out. Let them check that out and invite them to.
My DM's ready.
Yeah, invite them to come on this show and let's hash it out, right here, because, I'm not scared. I appreciated the conversation. I appreciated the experience, because for me, this is the work I do. And so that was information for me to so the challenge is, how do we process this? How do we make this work for us? Right. So those women, and these are very intelligent, highly accomplished women. I have mad respect for each and every one that was on there, even the ones that can't stand my guts. But in spite of their accomplishments, were clearly traumatized. Their responses were traumatized. There's one thing when you have a disagreement, we can sit back and we can rationally discuss the disagreement. But when one word sets you to the point where you can't recover and carry yourself with, a modicum of decency and respect the other person, even when the person's really pissed you off, that's when you need your emotional intelligence. But when you're traumatized, you're not able to do that. So here's my 3. Race, which impacts our identity, which puts us in daily situations of trauma. That is what is contributing to just one of the ills in our community. And the one of today is single parenthood. Because we don't understand who we are, we don't even know we should be working together. Just as both of you said, you're in these high power positions, you're at points of success, but you're not in any better position to begin to heal and bridge and work together. That's a problem. That means that even though you are successful, you're not empowered. When you have to assimilate, that right alone tells you that you're not the one with leverage here. Who's assimilating? Mm-hmm. Who's assimilating to you? Nobody. So we think individual terms. I got my 6 figures. I'm good. All right. So those are the 3 things. And so I'm going to read this. This whole experience has caused me. I'm writing my 5th book now.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm writing my 5th book based on this discussion. I'm going to read something out. I'm going to just kind of give away a little nugget here, because I think this one is going to really kind of just really elicit some strong reactions. But what I learned from that experience was this. First of all, men are men. So what I realized is that As a man, this is going to sound bad, but I don't mean it to sound bad.
It ain't Clubhouse.
And I'm not going to pounce on you.
As a man, not that I have no, this not in no way reflects my value towards the women in our community. But as a man, I don't require you to agree with me. I don't require it. Your anger at me for whatever I do is not a showstopper for me. Mm-hmm. Because I know that being a man is not a popularity contest. It's not about being popular. Being a man is about being a man. So here's what I wrote, and still in this rough draft. Most women will follow their men. For every one woman who says she won't, there are at least 10 others that will. So men, don't worry about convincing women of anything. Just convince yourself. Trying to convince a woman from a man's perspective almost always proves an exercise in futility, frustration, and the acronym FUBAR. Why? Because the primary strength of a man is his ability for objectivity and logic. However, when in potentially difficult conversations with the average woman, not all, use of objectivity and logic is a fatal flaw in our attempts at understanding and resolution. It almost never works. So men, don't expend valuable emotional and mental energy in that regard. Now, I say that to say that, again, it's not about disregarding the woman. It's about men being men. And now the responsibility of the man, this may sound chauvinistic, but, men forge the way. That's the platform that I operate from as a man. Men forge the way. So we have, and men are forging the way. We're just not forging it effectively, because there's women still following behind these men that are messing everything up. So it's not about whether the woman will follow you. The woman's going to clearly follow you. But are you on the right path? DeAndre said, I will submit under proper leadership. Men, are you doing it properly? Statistically speaking, men, no, we are not. We are not on a statistical level. There are individuals carrying it and holding it down, but the individual males are catching hell for all the other males that ain't doing it the way they're supposed to do it. And so the average woman is not able to really disassociate emotion. The average woman is not able to disassociate emotion from objective critical thinking. And for most people, it's almost impossible to think critically when under emotional duress. And when you're emotionally triggered, critical thinking goes out the door. So that was the biggest lesson I learned from that beating I took in Clubhouse. I was like, you know what? I learned, but I'm not deterred, because number one, I'm the man. Whether you like it or not, I prefer you to like it, but it's not required for you to like it, because I'm not doing this as a popularity contest. I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do for the people in my community. So what are your thoughts on that? And then we can close out and come back on here on part 3. DeAndre, how does this hit you? You ready to cuss me out? We can't hear you. She should be coming back. She must be in a bad area. Daniel, what's your thoughts on this male perspective?
So it's interesting, right? Because I always, whenever I see that submit argument, I always say, first and foremost, the text never said women submit to men. The text actually says wives submit to your husband. So the average man expecting submission from a woman that's not his wife is foolish. And so I always say reframe.
Oh, yeah. Right? Great observation. Great observation.
You got to reframe that discussion. Once you've reframed the discussion, then it becomes down to exactly what DeAndre said, which is if a man is not capable of leading, then he should not expect submission. Right. And it's interesting, right? Because sometimes being a man, and I think a lot of times we let social media and media and entertainment kind of teach us how to be a man. And it goes back to, I'll talk about this in the closing. Being a man just means being accountable for yourself,
right,
and your growth and your community and your tribe. And I think we've made it more complicated than that, but that's at the root of it. That's really what it is, right? Are you accountable to yourself, to your community, to your tribe? If you do those things, everything else kind of falls into place behind that. And leadership is a part of that, right? I think the complaint of a lot of women is that men tend not to be, they don't know how to lead.
Not only that, Daniel, because you said a key word, which again goes back to the obstacle that I submitted in here, which is identity. Leading their tribe.
Yes,
that's a loaded, powerful word. Their tribe. Who is their tribe? And the average man in our community has no affiliation with the tribes, and that's why he tries to associate with these other things that's going on out here, because your tribe needs to begin with you, and then you find like-minded
individuals,
right, and create that. So we've got some identity work to do, which is a mindset piece, that the word that DeAndre's opened it up to show with. It's mindset. And so I always say that blame and responsibility are not synonymous.
No, but they sound the same.
They almost sound, they sound the same. And so blame is not a useful strategy at all. Responsibility, however, is hugely important, because it doesn't have to be your fault for it to be your responsibility. And which one's going to get you further? Establishing blame or establishing responsibility? You know what I'm saying? And so our community is in constant blaming. Here's one of the other comments that they said. Now get this. In the Clubhouse story I'm sharing with you, they said racism or systemic issues wasn't the problem. Patriarchy was a problem. And I had never heard that before, that patriarchy was the attack on our community. I said, well, tell me how patriarchy has attacked our community. And one of them said something about, well, you all got to vote first.
Not exactly.
You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying this to criticize or belittle. But it just points out the depth of the trauma. And DeAndre, I think, said it earlier. It's like we are pitting our experiences against each other. Well, it happened to me, but it didn't happen to you. Well, this happened to me, it didn't happen. That's not how we win. We don't win by comparing scars. But when you're traumatized with your own experience, because trauma limits your ability to look at the big picture. And they weren't able to look at the big picture because first of all, they were totally outdone by that word disapprove. They were done. And, admittedly,
Use that. Don't use that word no more.
don't ever use that word. Don't ever use that word.
I'm using that word in every post going forward. Just because.
But you know what? We've all been triggered at times. I still get triggered. I was triggered that night. But that's where your emotional intelligence has to come into play. And you have to say, you have to be able to control your worst nature sometimes, because you have to keep the bigger picture in mind that you're not my enemy. You're not my enemy. There's another cliche I use: attack the problem, not the person. So the fact that, okay, so you're saying because the African male got to vote first, that puts you in a bad situation. So that's like as if that was something we did to you. See, there's no logic to that. It's a larger picture at play. So, DeAndre, I didn't get a chance to get your perspective on this little blurb I wrote in the book. I want you to speak on that, and we're going to close out.
I think twofold. I do agree that you should not worry yourself with what who says. How did you put it? What one woman, the one that won't follow. Basically, what I got from it was, look, she's not gonna follow you, but there's others that will. So focus on what you're doing, because those that will follow you will follow you. And I absolutely agree. And so I have no problem with what you said. I honestly have no problem with what most men say, because I believe everybody is entitled to their opinion. And I love to hear different perspectives from that. And I love that perspective, because it's also things that I teach my son. Sorry, we're getting in and out the car. We just got home. Right. I teach my son. We have to go find food as a whole. So I've been sitting in the car while they went into Costco and got food and whatnot. But I teach my sons that. I teach my daughters that. I even tell my friends that don't worry about what Casey is doing over here, because if Casey isn't doing what you need them to do, Jennifer, Alice, Michael, Don, all of them may come through and do for you. It's if you focus on the ones that won't, then you'll never see the ones that will. That's what I got from that.
Okay. All right. So, all right. So I'm going to keep writing. I think I'm going to have fun writing. My first works are usually based on evidence. I use a lot of research and evidence. This book, I'm going totally off of just man perspective. That's it. I'm just going totally off of man perspective. And see, here's the thing about me. I talk and write to be challenged. I don't talk and get in these conversations for everybody to agree. That's boring. Nobody grows from that. Right? But
you don't want an echo chamber.
I don't need an echo chamber. A real man and a real woman don't require echo chambers.
Exactly.
You're secure in your own right. So and that's we're all works in progress on that. So anyway, it is the alternative perspectives, the differences of opinions, and sometimes what you don't agree with today hits you later. People don't realize that seeds can be planted. Those words that hit you most probably is where most of your growth lies, and most people don't realize that. So I always try to remain as flexible as possible in my mentality, and that's why I appreciate having these discussions with you guys, because clearly we are like-minded in how we approach conversations, even if we have differences of opinion, differences of perspectives. So let's see. How do we end this show today? Do we leave some homework? We gotta address this gap. I want you all to pretend to be teachers, starting with DeAndre. Give the listeners and viewers a homework assignment to address or contribute towards the solution to our community gap? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I say, and I used to be a teacher. I used to be a teacher, so this is right up alley.
Awesome.
But I'd say I'd want everyone, male and female, to take a piece of paper and a pen and just write a line down the middle and write pros and cons. What are the pros of one of the topics we discussed today of feminism on our community? And what are the cons? And then we can come back and we can compare what you have on that list, because I guarantee you a lot of it is redundancy.
Go ahead, Queen. Go ahead. I just put her on the spot. You see how she did
That's
that
the old
quick?
high school teacher and me coming out. Sorry.
Ooh-wee. She ate that up. All right. Oh, I love this show. Big Daniel.
It's simple, man. We keep talking about the trauma, and I think that the homework has to be, you got to heal. You got to start the process of healing. And that's on both sides. We spend a lot of time taking out trauma that someone else did to us, and it's like somebody else hit us, so now I'm mad at you for that. And so I think that part of the homework that each and every one of us has to do, myself included, start working through that trauma and start defining your own identity rather than the definition that somebody puts on you. And that's not something that will be done by the next time we meet, but it's a process that you have to start now. You have to start healing. You have to start redefining what your priorities, what your values, and ultimately what you stand for will be.
Awesome.
I love it.
And my homework assignment that I'm going to give out is coming off the tail end of what Daniel just proposed. Your assignment, viewers and watchers, is to answer the following question. Are you your color, or are you your culture? That's an identity question for homework. And culture is the totality of behaviors, beliefs, and practices that make one group of people distinct from another group. So you can't say things like, well, my culture is I'm a pastor, or I'm a preacher or teacher. No, culture grasps all of that. It's generally associated with a geographic body of land. So your cultural ethnicity is going to be closely associated with a geographical region, and it will most likely sound like the name of that region. So that's your homework. All right. We have talk class today. Deantrice, Daniel, I ain't scared of you.
None of you.
Williams, you two have been great show, great discussion. To everybody else, have a great week. Yes, we did. Have a great week. And until the next time we meet, we'll see you in the black space.
See ya.